Hey guys, Khalid from Cricket Fanatics magazine, and I'm here with, I would say, world-renowned journalist.
Where?
I would say Telford Vice. Telford, this is a series where we kind of try to talk. I try to learn from senior journalists and really try to pick up some tips from you guys and how some of your experiences in the industry. I mean, I haven't been that long in the industry, so I like to learn and pick your brain and hear some of the great stories that you've covered, etc. I mean, there was a particular story that I remember quite fondly, is the one with Amla, and we were talking about the fasting and the way you used your words to describe fasting with different type of food analogies, etc. And I really enjoyed it. So let's just start with, how did you get into journalism at first?
I was always going to be a journalist. I knew this from the age of 12, and I didn't really care what it was about. And the vacancy was cricket writer at the Daily Dispatch in East London. And I applied. And I had applied to the Daily Dispatch every 3 months for a few years, from my standard 9 year. Right. And I just hadn't got in. And eventually the vacancy came and it was cricket writer. So that is how I became a cricket writer. That was in 1991, and here we are.
So as a 12-year-old, what drew you to journalism particularly? Was it just because you read a lot in that days?
I read a lot. Journalism always came with a certain mystique, I suppose. You know, it's always the oaks and the hats, chomping cigars, you know, and writing about things, and the whole thing about telling stories for a living just appealed to me a great deal. And yeah, and there's that kind of immediacy with journalism where you've got to get the story out now, you know, and it's not there for long, so you better make it the best story you can, because it's going to be overtaken by other things. So, you know.
With regards to cricket journalism, because compared to any other sport, it's a lot more different to other sports, I would say. You spend a lot of time at the field, you spend a lot of time in different types of countries that you not normally will see. So what are some of the experience and the highlights so far in your journalism career?
I'll try and tell you a condensed version of something that happened on my very first tour, which was I was a journalist for 7 months and they sent me off to the West Indies.
Wow.
In 1992, to go and cover, South Africa played 3 one-days and a test match. And going from Jamaica, where the first one-day was, to Trinidad, where the next 2 one-days were, something happened in the airport with 3 journos, myself included, and we were told we were not on that flight. Wow. And in the process of trying to get through this, my laptop got wrecked by a trolley, got run away. So I get on the plane with this broken laptop. The plane almost falls into the sea, has to return to the airport. We sit there for 4 hours. We get to Trinidad at 2 in the morning. They take our passports away, just for fun. Yeah. And now I'm like bromming standing there. And we get to the hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning. And Tony Cozier, the West Indian commentator, he's there, and his son is there, Craig. And there's nobody in the lobby of this hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning. And Craig Cozier's got the bags. He puts the bags down and he says, "Cozier is here." And I don't know where they came from. 15 people came leaping over the front, and they basically carried the Coziers up to their room. And I thought to myself, this is going to be a fun job. And that was one day. So yeah, you know, and there's obviously been big stories that I've had to cover, things like the Hansi Cronje situation. Yes. I really grew up there as a journalist, I think, because I sat there at the King Commission afterwards, the investigation, and I thought, this is about a lot more than sport, you know. And it really grew me up as a cricket writer, that experience, because it's like, okay, we think these guys are heroes and that they are wonderful human beings, but actually some of them are not. Yeah. And I think I learnt a lot there, just to look at cricket a little more critically and how I cover it.
Yeah, you know. Because of that, obviously you would have seen a lot of transitional phases in South African cricket. South Africa is going through one currently with the new staff, etc. But what was it like to cover South Africa? Obviously during that period of post-isolation, and all of that happening, I mean, what was it like to be in that era?
It was quite strange in a lot of ways, because you still had, and it still happens today, white people still thought they owned the game, and that black people were simply there as add-ons. And it still happens, unfortunately. It happens to a much less degree now, much lesser degree. But it was, and that was, you know, that same 92 tour in Trinidad, actually. I remember looking down onto the breakfast room in the hotel, and all of the team were over there having breakfast, except Omar Henry, who was, of course, the one player of colour who was completely on the other side of the breakfast room. And that struck me, and I thought, this is not lacquer. This isn't how things should be. So, you know, that was what I took away from that era, was there was this kind of underlying division. There was a lack of acceptance of people of colour and players of colour. It's still there today to some degree, and of course it's still influencing the debate about how we go forward with this game. And yeah, so that's what that was like. From a cricketing point of view, I mean, there were some amazing things. That you know, some World Cup meltdowns and things like that. You know, I'm afraid if you're South African, all you ever know is World Cup meltdowns. So yeah, so politically it was interesting. On the field also obviously interesting. Some hell of a players, people like Jonty Rhodes, always enjoyed just as a human being, one of the most intelligent cricketers I've ever spoken to. Very, very sharp man. You know, and then you got some idiots like Vani de Villiers.
Okay, so one of the last questions that I want to ask you before, one is cricket related and one is non-cricket related. But the first one is, if you had to pick, because it's a new decade, if you had to pick one moment out of the decade that stood out to you, what would it be?
Yeah, this decade so far, where are we now? 2020. I would say it's Kagiso Rabada and Joe Root. I think that has summed up where we are as a you know, it asks all the questions about who we think we are. What was KG doing in his face like that? If you look at videos, you can see him kind of running back into Root's space. What is he trying to say? You could write a whole political thesis on slavery and colonialism and this man trying to reclaim history, you know, those kinds of things. And I think we need to ask ourselves important questions now. He's a wonderful player, obviously, Rabada, but how is it going to be managed? And we need people out there to also go take a step back and not simply defend him like mad because he's black, because that's not going to help any of us get anywhere. We've got to get beyond that kind of thing and see what he does and try and make a difference, you know. And we can khanan forever about the code of conduct and what a bunch of nonsense, but it's still going to be there, you know. You can go on forever about why I hate wearing a seatbelt, but if you get caught, you're going to pay the fine. So it's a similar situation. That for me has stuck out in this decade so far, you know.
Okay. So lastly, just a message to young journalists, how they can be inspired by you and go into journalism, why they should start it, and a few tips to them.
Write from your heart, you know, don't write from a textbook. I'm very skeptical about whether people can actually be taught to be journalists. I was never taught, so I suppose I would think that. I've never been to university. But write from your heart, you know. Don't write the obvious. Don't read too much journalism, because then you are going to get influenced by other people's ideas and you're going to end up writing like other people. I don't read very much cricket journalism, not because I'm trying to be arrogant, but because I'm trying to preserve my own voice. Yeah. And I hope that's worth reading. And those kinds of things, you know, you need to be and respect for the reader is my big bugbear. Every story I write, I sit down and think, why should anybody bother reading this? That's my starting point. Every story I write, I want to write something which people should want to read. I don't want to tell them what happened on the field, really, because they've seen that on TV, or they've seen it all over Twitter or on whatever website. So you must give people a reason to read your story. Otherwise, what's the point?
Lastly, where can they find you?
You can find me on Cricbuzz, apparently the world's biggest cricket website. Don't tell my wife I said that. And my wife is Firdous Moonda from Cricket Info. This is why I'm saying so. And I run a blog as well. Everything I write gets republished on my blog, which is called Bulletproof Truth. And it's a WordPress blog. You can find me there.
Thanks a lot, guys. And remember to subscribe to our channel, press the notification bell if you're watching it on YouTube, share and comment in the comment section below, as well as on Facebook. And we'll catch you again. Thanks, guys.